Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 257. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about hidden lakes, glaciers, and big sky as we go to Glacier National Park and western Montana.
One more cafe. I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Before we get into this week's interview, I do have two news stories for you. One is an airline survey just came out, and this was from Zagat, and they ranked which were the best airlines. The top three airlines were Virgin America, JetBlue, and Hawaiian, according to their customers. But even those airlines didn't do that great. On a 30-point scale, they scored 21, 19, and 16. Or as they pointed out in the article at chriselliottselliot.org, that would be a C, a D, and an F, and those are the top three. Everybody else was an F. The kind of comments they got were, well, at least they haven't killed me yet, and my bags get better service, but they pay extra. So not happy times in the airline industry, but if you think you can change it, you might be interested to know that Delta Airlines is hiring 1,000 new flight attendants, although 100,000 people have applied, so get your resume in quickly. Links to both of those stories in the show notes at amateurtraveler.com. I'd like to welcome back to the show Carl Anders, who's come to talk to us about the great big sky state of Montana. Carl, welcome back to the show.
Nice to be back, Chris. Thanks for having me.
And for those of you who don't know, Carl was on the show previously talking about Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka to Montana, that's a little bit of a difference there in climate, if nothing else. And I think you were pitching the northwestern part of Montana around Glacier National Park. Why should we go to Montana?
Well, I think it's one of the most beautiful places in the world, certainly the places I've ever been to. If you want a place with lots of scenery, lots of wildlife, big sky like you talked about, rivers, trees, lakes, and not a lot of people, Montana is perfect.
Now, they call it big sky country. What does that mean, first of all?
It literally means an unobtrusive view. It's like if you're standing somewhere, you get to see 180 plus degrees of the sky all around you. And there are many parts in Montana, actually in the West, where you sort of get that feeling, but it's wide open, unobstructed. And obviously, in places, you're not going to have that in Montana. But if you're out in the valleys and on plateaus and in a lot of the, especially the eastern part of the state where you have the flatter lands, that's big sky country.
Okay.
Now, I live in Spokane, which is in eastern Washington, and I live there mostly because it's related to my business. I work in the medical field, and Spokane is sort of the medical hub of the inland northwestern area. But I like to travel to Montana whenever I can, and it's just, as I say, a great place to visit. And the crown gem, the greatest of the scenic things in that area, of course, is Glacier National Park.
Well, the first time I went to Montana, and I'm trying to think, I think I've been there a couple times. My father told the story that when he was in college, he drove from Colorado to Banff for a conference, and the people he were driving with wanted to drive through Montana at night because there was nothing to see there.
Oh, my God. Well, if you drive through Montana at night, indeed, you will see nothing. But that's a gem miss. That's not something I would recommend. You want to go through there in daylight and with your eyes wide open if you can. Because, as I said, I think the scenery is terrific.
Well, and he talked them into driving in daytime, but they did go up to Glacier National Park. They got to the first turnaround, oohed and awed at the scenery, went back and said, oh, we better get a campsite. And the next morning when he said, well, let's go see the park, they said, well, we saw it yesterday. So what did they miss?
Well, they missed quite a bit. I don't know if they came in on the eastern or the western side. They probably
I think they came on the eastern side.
On the eastern side, right. And the character of the two sides is a little bit different. The western side gets a lot more rain, and it is the Continental Divide that goes through the heart of the park. And the eastern side is a little bit more on the rain shadow. It's not completely dry, but it's relatively drier, so the trees are a little bit shorter, less thick, a little bit less lush, but still very beautiful. What did they miss? They missed great peaks. They missed the Continental Divide. They missed tons of wildlife, tons of scenery. They missed hundreds of lakes and hundreds of miles of great hiking trails. They missed great rustic old lodges, of which there are a number in the park, and of course they probably missed the glaciers. But if they're going to Banff, they saw some of those up there. It is great scenery in Banff as well. I think Glacier and Banff are sort of comparable. Banff may be even a little bit more spectacular, but that's in a foreign country.
The highway there is very well known, the Going to the Sun Highway.
Yes.
But it sounds like you're recommending we actually get out of the car further than the parking lot.
I think going to the Sun Highway is a drive everybody should do. And it's maybe the most scenic drive in the country. There's a lot of argument about what's the prettiest drive in the country, but it is about 50 miles long, and it's just a beautiful road. It took years and years to construct this. It provided among the first access of people back in the 20s and 30s. I think the road was completed in the early 30s. To the Continental Divide and to the high alpine, subalpine areas of the Rockies. And at the time, that was a great thing. The road is a dramatic architectural feat. It just winds up these sheer mountains, and there are lots of pull-out with breathtaking views, as you said. But the neat thing about the highway, I think, is getting to the top and enjoying, as you're going, of course, enjoying the view as you go. And at the top, which is about 6,500 or so feet above sea level, you have Logan Pass, and at the pass is a visitor center, and that's a really good place for everybody to stop and to try to spend a little bit of time. Logan Pass is a beautiful area, and I think one of, if not maybe the best hikes in the park is right behind the visitor center there.
Do you remember the name of that hike?
Yeah, it's the Hidden Lakes Trail, and there's a path which is really busy in the summer on a nice day, but is worth doing even with people. It's very well constructed, and it takes you through an alpine meadow where in the summer you can't imagine more wildflowers than this anywhere. There are millions and millions of wildflowers of all different types blooming. And as you climb up several hundred feet, it's not a real rigorous climb, but it is fairly high, so you want to take it a little bit slow. And about 1.5 miles in, you'll get to an overview of some beautiful lakes called the Hidden Lakes. But one of the key reasons for hiking this particular trail is you're almost guaranteed to see quite a bit of wildlife. There's usually several dozen mountain goats that hang out in the area. Bighorn sheep hang out in the area. A lot of deer as well. So you get to see some of the animals that the Rockies and especially Glacier are well known for. And this is a hike I'd recommend everybody do. A note of caution, if you're going to go in the summer, the parking at the top is very limited. And if you know you want to go on this hike, you'd be better off taking either the shuttle or the famous red jammer buses, which is unique to Glacier. These were also built in the 30s when the park sort of first became popular. And they're an open car bus kind of thing where maybe a dozen people can get in with the driver. And you'll stop along the way and you can get out and go for a hike or do something like that. But it's a really great place to go. So I would recommend that. Among the others, I try to get onto a few new trails every year if possible. And the backcountry of Glacier is really spectacular. So if you can, of course, not everybody is able to hike, but if you can hike, this is one of the best places in the country to do it. It's almost always rated by Backpacker magazine as the best place in the country to hike or backpack.
Now, you talked about if we went in the summer, is there a season of the year that is your favorite in, let's take Glacier, first of all?
Well, it's a good thing about when to come. The season here is really pretty limited because you are pretty high up.
Right.
And the Going to the Sun Highway gets about 50 or 60 feet of snow on it every year. It's sort of like Table Pass in Yosemite. It often doesn't get cleared until June. Again, it depends on the weather and how much snow there is and stuff like that. So you have only about a 3-month window, really, where the Going to the Sun Highway is completely open. And that's the best time to come. And most people want to do that drive, the Going to the Sun Highway. That would be the time I would say you want to come. Because you are pretty high up and you're pretty far north, the spring is cool and you can have snow at the high altitudes pretty much at any time, but especially in spring and fall. A little bit of snow is really beautiful. I've been there in September a number of times, and if you have a clear day, the mountains are frosted with fresh snowfall and it's still really beautiful. And there are a lot less people there if you go after Labor Day. That would probably be the best single time to go if you can, is the couple of weeks after Labor Day, when it's still pretty nice, but there are a lot less cars and you can easily park wherever you want to.
Now, you mentioned that it gets quite high up. I want to say that it doesn't get as high up as, say, Trail Ridge Road in Rocky Mountain National Park, which is about 11,000 feet, but I don't remember how tall the pass is.
I can tell you specifically in just a minute. I think it's about 6,500 feet, something like that. 46 feet.
Okay.
But it is much farther north than Colorado, so that factors into the cooler climate.
Absolutely, sure. And it's right there on the Canadian border, for those of you who can't picture where this is in your map.
And it actually shares an international park with Waterton Lakes, which is immediately north of Glacier. So it is one of the international peace parks between Canada and the United States. And that's kind of cool, too.
Right, exactly.
It used to be very easy to go from one to the other, but now you have passports and border security and all those hassles. It makes it less fun to travel to Canada right there. But if you remember to bring your passport, it's fun to go up and see Waterton Lakes and the Prince of Wales Hotel there.
And is there anything else that you would recommend we do in the park before we start talking about the area around there in that part of Montana?
Right. Well, we talked mostly about the Going to Sun Road. There's a lot of Great Lakes and sort of regions of the park. And on the west side, the main area is around McDonald Lake. And that's the biggest lake in the park. And there's a lodge there and camping there. So that would sort of be one main lake. A very popular place on the other side of the park is the Many Glaciers area. And this may be the most scenic part of the park. There are some beautiful lakes. There are, of course, still a couple of remnant glaciers left there. And the landscape very molded by glaciers, which is, I think, where the name of the park comes from. Not so much in the glaciers that persist there, but that the landscape was molded by glaciers in the last great ice age. My favorite place in the park to camp and hang out is the Two Medicine Lake, which is in the southeastern side. And I like it just because it's probably the least busy park. It's easy usually to get camping. I like to camp if I go there. And you can hike on trails and not run into anybody for a while. And having said that, just a warning, this is grizzly bear country, so you need to be ready for that with bear spray, preferably to hike in groups of people. But the bear danger is pretty small, but it is grizzly bear country. And you will also see grizzly bears there. I've seen a number over the years that I've been there.
Interesting.
What else is there to see? There's the lakes. They have old, really classic old customized boats, and going on a boat cruise is really beautiful. Some of the boats take you inland, and you can easily then hike to subalpine lakes and stuff like that. There's great fishing, lots of wildlife like we talked about, especially the mountain goats. That is the animal of the park. And they have a really interesting series of old lodges, if you like great old hotels. The Great Northern Pacific Railway built a number of them here as a place to bring tourists to when the park opened. And there are 4 or 5. There's one on Lake McDonald. There's a very beautifully set one at the Mini Glaciers area, the Mini Glacier Hotel. There's a couple of ones in the backcountry you can only access by walking, but there's the Sperry and the Granite Park Chalet. And these aren't real fancy, but it's sort of nice to have a place where you can hike into and have a bed and great food prepared for you and not have to take your tent and all your camping gear and stuff with you. Those are pretty hard to get reservations for. Actually, I'm finally this year going to be able to go to the first one of those for a couple of nights in July of this year.
How does the reservation system work?
Good luck. You just have to sort of call in. It opens about the beginning of, I want to say about middle of September or late September. And you can fill out an online request, but persistence and phone calling will get you through. That's what finally worked for me. And very much looking forward to that. The lodges are high up, beautiful settings, great scenery. And I think the Sperry one is about an 8-mile hike with a 3,000-foot altitude gain. So it's a challenging hike to go in, but when you're up there, you can relax and enjoy the high country and enjoy all the mountain goats walking by and stuff like that. So there is a system of old lodges, which is kind of neat. If you like old hotels, I definitely recommend it for people who want to explore that further, and we can put a link if you want for that on the show notes.
And you did mention fishing, and I am not personally a fisherman, probably because I don't like to eat fish, but I am the son of a fisherman, and so I have been fishing in Montana, and I know people who fly from the East Coast all the way to Montana to fish because it's really known for some very good fishing in the area. I'd say Montana and Alaska probably are the 2 states that I hear from your real serious fishermen.
Exactly. And if you're fishing to catch fish to eat, that you're missing out on the fun of it. The real fishermen catch and release, as you know. I'll take a fish in here and there. I'm not an avid fisherman, but I enjoy fishing. But mostly I enjoy fishing because it gets me out of doors. The rivers of western Montana and northern Idaho, probably the best fly fishing rivers in the country. And if you're a serious fly fisherman, that alone is reason to come to northwestern Montana. There are also great rivers for whitewater rafting. And there are a number of vendors that provide really exciting day trips and multi-day trips down the rivers. And again, a lot of fun, not really dangerous, beautiful scenery, and bald eagles and things along that line. So that can be a lot of fun too.
When you talk about catch and release, I found that it was much simpler to avoid that whole step and just not catch in the first place. But
and I can understand
this
that.
may be why my father stopped going fishing with me, but...
It's not for everybody, but I just like being out there. And that's what I like about Glacier. It's so beautiful, and just being out in nature. To me, that's the best cathedral in the world. That is where I like to go, and it is frankly where I feel closest to God when I go.
And while we're in that area, what else should we see in northwestern Montana?
Well, there's something like 6 million acres of public forested land in the area. You have Lolo National Forest, Kootenai National Forest, Flathead National Forest, the Bitterroot Forest, lots of mountains, the rivers and lakes we talked about. Population-wise, there aren't a lot of people here. And if you're looking for an urban vacation, this is not the place to come. But if you're looking for places with wide open spaces, lots of scenery, lots of great natural beauty, lots of animals, again, this is where you come. There's a big lake to the west of Glacier called Flathead Lake. And that one has about 180 miles of shoreline, just to give you some idea. It is a natural lake. And it's a pretty deep lake. I think it goes down to about 400 feet deep. So it's a cooler lake, but this is a good place for boating, water skiing, jet skiing. Just south of there, there's a place called the National Bison Refuge, which isn't really large, but it's a really neat place. It's about a 25-mile loop drive with a herd of buffalo. It was actually the first place in the country where the government made an effort to save buffalo. And they have a herd there, a pretty stable herd of about 400 buffalo or so. And deer and elk and pronghorn antelopes and things like that live on these plains, and wonderful views. So that's a neat place to go for half day. The main city in the area is Missoula. And I like small cities. It's a city of maybe 85,000 or so people. It is home to the University of Montana. It's sort of the main commerce center in the area.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where most people would spend a day or two. And if you like small cities, I would recommend spending a couple of nights here. Spend a day exploring the city. What to see? One of the things they have is the Smoke Jumper Visitor Center. Do you know what a smoke jumper is?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
The firefighters who jump out of
Right.
planes. Yeah.
These are the ballsiest people in the world. They not only jump out of rickety little planes, but they jump into thick forests a few hundred feet away from an active forest fire. So they're very brave. They jump with a lot of equipment. And you can go to the place where they train these people, where they outfit them. It's a completely free visit. The smoke jumpers are there. You can talk to them. They're like most heroes. They're kind of shy, not at all egotistical. Very, very nice group of young people. About 10% of them are women. And you can see how they stock and supply and how they fight fires and stuff like that. And there's a lot of innovations made in firefighting at this place. So it's free. That's definitely the one thing I'd recommend if you're going to go to Missoula.
Interesting.
See the Smoke Jumper Visitor Center.
Well, and for people who don't know smoke jumpers, part of their training is what do you do when the fire actually overruns your position, when you're in the midst of the fire. And so, yeah, that's right. Not a job for the timid.
No, and it's really a very dangerous job because if the winds change suddenly, there's no way you can outrun a wildfire.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And they basically have developed equipment where it's almost like a little pup tent, but it's completely fireproof. They can pull that over them, and they can actually survive about a minute at, I want to say 800 degrees or something like that, through a fire burning over them.
Fascinating.
Yeah, they made a lot of techniques. They show you how they parachute and how they check their parachutes, and it's really a fun place to go. It's completely free, and I was fascinated by our visit there.
And we should tell people, if you want to fall in love with Missoula, the movie I would recommend is A River Runs Through It, which takes place in Missoula, Montana, as well as foreign destinations.
Yeah, there's a lot of transplanted people that live here. Huey Lewis, the rock and roll singer, has made this his home, and he loves it. The Clark Fork River runs right through the city, and that's sort of the heart of the city. There's parks on both sides. The University of Montana is on one side of the river, and on the other side you have the old, and it's an old city, it's a 100-plus-year-old city with buildings of that era, an old train station. Saturday they have a really fun farmers market with a lot of unusual crafts, different than you see in a lot of places. And they have a train station museum there, the Northern Pacific Railway Museum. A place that was sort of different that I would recommend people have a look at, they have the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation in Missoula. And it basically is an organization started by hunters for the preservation of elk. And I think these people don't get enough credit for the kind of work they do for conservation. They have, in the last 10 years, 4 million acres of land have been saved for preservation of wild animals. And yes, they hunt, but hunters, of course, have a big stake in preserving. So it's an interesting thing to see, and how they go about preserving the elk, and you can study the natural history of the elk. The elk is, of course, the biggest game animal in the northwestern United States. Everybody who wants to hunt wants elk. The meat is the best of all the game animals, so I'm told.
I've eaten elk, and it was very good.
Yeah, it is good. It depends partly on what they're feeding. The deer out this way actually are pretty good, too, because they mostly eat off wheat. So, but it depends. But elk is an excellent game animal. I am not a hunter, but I know a lot of people who are. And as I say, they're usually the most conservation-minded people I know. So I think there's definitely a role for that. The Bitterroot Valley isn't far from there, Chris, and that's a really beautiful place. A lot of Hollywood types have big mansions in the valley there. And the Lewis and Clark Trail actually extends partly through that area as well. That area is a great place for hiking and camping. In the winter, of course, you have skiing and snowboarding throughout. So it is a beautiful and great natural travel destination.
And when you talk about these areas, we're getting around by car, really, in this area is going to be the best way to get around.
It's just about the only way. Some people do it by bike. If you have a lot of time, that's fun. I would be cautious about doing the going to the Sun Highway by bike, though some people do it. But it's a pretty narrow road, and there's no shoulders, and the drop can be sheer in places. So it's not something I would feel comfortable doing, but people who are good at it are okay with it. But yeah, you want to have a car. You want to definitely bring your car or rent a car. The main airports in the area are in Missoula and in Kalispell, which is really just on the outskirts of West Glacier. Kalispell is a small town of about 25 or 30,000 people, and not a whole lot to see and do there. It's a nice place too, but if you want to visit one city in northwestern Montana, Missoula would be the one you want to see. It's a pretty little town.
Okay. Anything that's going to surprise me when I go up to this area?
I think you'd be surprised at how beautiful it is. I've been to a lot of pretty places in my travels, but I sort of felt really grateful that fate and opportunity have plopped me down in what may be one of the prettiest places on the planet. It's just a great, beautiful place.
And you mentioned bear spray. Is there any other warnings we would give about somebody heading to this area?
Well, if you see a mother bear with a cub, go the other way.
Yeah.
That's really the only dangerous thing is if you get between a mother bear and her cub, be it a black bear or grizzly, you don't want to do that. So mothers are very protective of their cubs, and we need to be respectful of that. You should be a little bit leery of walking by yourself in the wilderness. It's really not unsafe in anything except if there is a bear attack, usually it's with one or two people. There has never been a bear attack with 6 or more people in a group. So if you want to be safe from bears, the best defense you have is to hike with 4 or 5 of your friends.
And I'm told that if you are chased by a bear, that you can tell if it's a black bear or a grizzly bear by climbing a tree, because the black bear will follow you up the tree and the grizzly will knock it down. I don't know if that's true or not.
Well, I told the best way to tell them apart is by the scat. The grizzly bear scat has the ones with the little bells that people wear to warn them in it, Yeah, grizzly bears have a harder time climbing. Black bears can climb, but grizzlies are surprisingly adept. And if you can, get up a tree. But if you're attacked by a grizzly, the best thing is just to play dead, and he'll leave you alone. A black bear, if he's attacking you, probably wants to eat you, and only a very desperate bear would do that. So you fight him with all you have. And there are ways of telling them apart, mostly by the hump and stuff like that, but we don't. I think that's a little bit beyond the...
And my guess is we're still talking about fewer people die from grizzly bear attacks in the U.S. than die by having vending machines fall on them or something like that. But
yeah, there's more people that die from lightning strikes than from bear attacks.
Right. Although the animal that kills more Americans than anything else is deer.
Deer, and from car accidents.
From car accidents, so watch when you're driving, especially at night.
That's not rare. I want to say something like 100 people a year are killed by deer. Killer deer, look out for them.
Yeah.
More so than by dog attacks, to put it in some perspective.
As we go to wind this down, any last recommendations of things we need to know before we go to northwestern Montana?
No, I think just bring along your hiking shoes and bring along a good attitude. Be ready for the kind of weather you might have, which can be extreme even in the summer. So always carry with you a fleece and a rain jacket, and come with an open and clear mind and just take it all in. It's just always, to me, breathtaking. Every time I go to Glacier, every time I go to northwestern Montana, my wife says I come back with a glow about me. It's just rejuvenating.
3 final questions for you.
Of course.
Is there anything that you've seen in Montana that's just made you laugh and say only in Montana?
A traffic jam caused by mountain goats.
All right.
Crossing the road. Yeah, I've never seen that anywhere else.
So they do have traffic there. It's just of a different variety. Okay.
Everybody stops when the mountain goats want to cross the road.
And then finish this sentence for me. You really know you're in Montana when what?
When you are surrounded by majestic peaks and it's a beautiful sunny day and the sky is clear, blue, just perfectly blue, and you're looking around you and you're seeing lots of wild animals, you know you're in Montana.
Excellent. And if you had to summarize Montana, northwestern Montana and Glacier National Park in 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
First one would be mountains.
Mm-hmm.
I think the second one would be wildlife.
Okay.
And I think the last one would be breathtaking. We'll hyphenate that one to make it one word, okay?
We'll give you the hyphenated there.
It's breathtaking.
Well, Carl, thanks so much for coming back on the show and telling us about your obvious love affair with Montana.
And thank you for having me, Chris. And folks, in the summer, come on up here. It's a beautiful place. You're going to enjoy yourself.
For For those of you who don't get over to the Amateur Traveler's website that often, and that is most of you, there is a new guest post that's been very popular over there. My first experience as a couch surfer, about a little bit of a couch surfing from hell experience, not because of the person that was involved, but because of a different couch surfer, and you'll have to read that to understand what I'm talking about. That is a guest post on the site. I'd love to get more guest posts. If you're interested in doing something, just check out the guest post guidelines, which are there posted on the Amateur Traveler's top page. Another change that you'll see on the website, and this will be good for those of you who are not using iTunes and never see the pictures on the episodes. I've had a request for some time, can you put those pictures up on the site? What I have done is I have embedded, I'm starting to get to all of the episodes. Right now I think there's about 200 of the 256 episodes that have been updated to have the embedded version of that. You have to have QuickTime, which most of you should have. If you don't, you'll be prompted with where to find that. But if you have QuickTime and have the plugin, then you should be able to see the pictures as you listen to the show if you click on the play enhanced version on any particular episode. We've got a comment from Wes on the episode on the Black Hills of South Dakota, which was a very popular episode. He says, I've been to the Black Hills twice. In fact, it was my very first experience with the Western U.S. back in 1989 and has been a special place in my fondest travel memories. Custer State Park. Can't say enough good things about this little piece of the Black Hills. Wish Fred discussed it a little more in the podcast, which was great, by the way. The Needles Highway is as much must-see as any of the rest of the Black Hills. The city of Deadwood, now for the sad part. I visited Deadwood both pre-gambling and post-gambling, as in after it was legal. Gambling in the casinos has totally destroyed the character of this city. Deadwood almost felt 1890 in my first visit there, but they decided to allow gambling sometime around 1990, and Deadwood died when the casinos took over. It's a really sad story, and I'm sure the residents there are truly sad they sold themselves out 2 decades ago. Apparently there was much resistance initially once they realized the damage that was done. Bringing in casinos is always a controversial thing, and actually will come up in an episode 2 weeks from now talking about Pittsburgh. And Paul also left a comment on the travel to West Bank and the Palestinian National Authority, episode 256, where he said, Hi Chris, I listened to this episode with my usual skepticism of any talk about the PA. I was pleasantly surprised to hear that the guest was fairly balanced in his discussion of the PA. There are 2 things that I wanted to correct your guest on, though. 1, the Golan Heights has never been considered part of the Palestinian Authority. You know, and I almost said something in the show, but I thought maybe I was wrong. And then 2, there are security issues in the Palestinian-controlled areas A, B, and C. Area A, full control by the Palestinian Authority. This constitutes about 2.5% of the land areas. B, Palestinian civil control and Israeli security control. This is about 25% of the land areas. And then Area C, full Israeli control except over Palestinian civilians, and this constitutes 72.2% of the land area. Interesting, I did not realize that. Jewish Israelis are generally not allowed into Area A, but are allowed into Area C and some parts of Area B. And I'd have to think if you're planning on a trip there, you might want to look up a map of what those areas are. And then similarly on the same episode, Nir left a comment and said, thanks for the podcast. Great review, but I did want to set the record straight. 1, the city of David is Jerusalem, not Bethlehem. And that is true. Nir is correct there, but the reason why I was calling it the city of David is a reference from the New Testament, from the Gospel of Luke, which is why many people are visiting the city of Bethlehem, which talks about Bethlehem being the town of David because of where David is from. And then number 2, Golan Heights, yes, nothing to do with the Palestinians. We got corrected by that one already. And then 3, October is generally not a good month for traveling to Jerusalem and Bethlehem. It's okay for Jericho and the Dead Sea. We are having an unusually dry winter this year. We have so far had no rain, which is very unusual. As you know, we get no summer rains here, so the winter rains are and have always been very important. October can be quite wet, cold, and miserable for a tourist in Jerusalem. So good to know. As we wrap up this show, I do have one favor to ask. If you have not done a review of this show on iTunes, and you happen to love the show and would love to give it a 5-star review, that would be great because a lot of people find the show through there, and that a good review helps them do that. So you might consider that a little Christmas present to the amateur traveler. With that, we're going to end this episode of The Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email at host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on the episode at amateurtraveler.com. And you can also follow me on Twitter at Chris2X. As always, thanks so much for listening.
neutral. I got to sit in one more cafe.